Well, welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you with us again tonight. Tonight we're making fried squash blossoms with a 3-cheese stuffing. These are the best appetizers you could ever want. Here are the ingredients. Pause and write them down. And hey, if you like our video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Well, to make fried squash blossoms, we want to start with male blossoms, and you see that little squash that's forming underneath that blossom? That means that's a female. That'll grow on up into a squash. You see my pollinator in there, and that's a male flower because there's no fruit underneath it. So the pollinators go from male to female and make your squash like this. So we don't want to waste the female blossoms. They're generally way more male than female, and we don't want to interrupt that pollination. So I'm going to cut a couple of the male blossoms from a couple different kind of squash. See, that's a male, and I'm going to find you a little female here on my lemon squash. There's one, and you see that is just a blossom. It's not really a squash yet, and if that female blossom doesn't get pollinated, it'll just fall off. That's why some folks think their squash are dying. They're not pollinated. So I've gathered these and dropped them down into some cold water, and you can see these are fairly nice. They got a couple little holes in them, but it doesn't matter. And inside there is that stamen. We're going to cut that out. I'm sorry I kind of got out of camera, but I'll show it to you. So we're going to cut that out, and we're going to keep these in cold water because they'll close up, and we want to keep them open. You really need to do this early in the morning when the blossoms are open. You can wait and cook them in the evening, but you need to gather them in the morning. And you know, if you don't have a garden, many markets sell squash blossoms, or so I'm told. I actually only remake them when I have fresh blossoms. So I'm rinsing this out under a really slow water stream. These are really fairly fragile. So you just want to treat them carefully and gently. But we do want to get them pretty clean, and we just do that with gentle water, you know, just because the bees were tracking on them. These have only been open for about a day, so there's not much there. Spray with any pesticides or anything like that, so we're just mostly getting dust off. And I'm going to drop a couple ice cubes down in here to keep these chilled, and then I'm going to pop them in the fridge until later. Well, it's much later. It's actually the next day. Something came up last night. I wasn't able to prepare these, so they've been in the fridge. But you can see they're still open, and they've been in cold water, so they're still very fresh. So now let's get cooking. So before I start making the stuffing, I'm going to take these out and shake some of the excess water off and let them be draining on a paper towel. You don't have to dry them. They don't have to be totally dry. We just want the excess water gone. And then we'll make our stuffing. Now this is an 8-ounce round of camembert cheese. You can use brie, but you need a kind of a moist cheese. And I'm only going to use half of this and trim the rind off, which you don't usually do, but for this we will. Figure leaves me about 3 ounces, and this is not exact. This is about 2 ounces of Asiago cheese, and I'm using a microplane because you want everything to be very fine. Then about 2 ounces of, well, this is Romano, but you can use Parmigiano Reggiano, and you can substitute Gruyere for the Asiago cheese. Just 3 cheeses that you like, at least 1 moist and 1 dry. And we want a little onion in here, but we don't want any onion chunks. So I'm going to use the microplane for this too. And that's just a half of a slice of onion. Everything in this needs to be very fine. and fresh garlic clove. This is wonderful garlic. It came out of my garden, and it's not fully dried. It's still just super fresh. You see how fine and moist that is? Then I'm going to add about 2 or 3 slivers of red bell pepper and chop it as finely as you can. I'm not grating it because if I do, then everything turns red. Then we're going to incorporate 1 beaten egg, and this is really just to give it some body. Then a pinch, about 1/8 of a teaspoonful of red pepper flakes and salt, and you can use black pepper if you'd rather. I just think red pepper flakes are tasty and pretty. And speaking of pretty, I'm gonna sprinkle in a little bit of dried parsley flakes here. You can use fresh, just make sure it's minced very, very fine, and the parsley flakes are optional. I don't even think I put them on the recipe card. I just thought they would be pretty. Then mix it in really, really well, and it'll take a little bit to incorporate all the cheese. You're going to have to make a judgment call here. If this is stiff enough to hold together, you don't need anything else. If you think you need a little firmness, add about a tablespoonful or so of cornstarch. And get it all mixed together well. And test it. If you need more cornstarch, use it. You just need it to be firm enough to hold together into a ball. Then a quick taste and adjust for salt and pepper. So now we're going to stuff the blossoms, and I've oiled my hands because I'm going to form this with my hands, and I'm going to stuff the blossoms, and I don't want to tear them. So a little oil helps that. So this is a big old heaping tablespoonful, and I'm going to form it into a long kind of tube. And I won't use all this, but I've got plenty to make sure that I get the blossom full. And so stuff it down in there and then just pinch off the excess. We want to round it up just a little bit, and I'm just going to fold these petals over. Tuck them where you need to make them stick. We want to try to close all the cheese up in there. And some of it may escape. I almost always have some escape, but you want to close it up as well as you can. And then we're going to shape them. I kind of make them a little more elongated just because they're easier to fry that way. But, you know, just make them into a pretty shape. And you may not get them all uniform. And don't worry too much about if you get everything absolutely covered. It's good too, but these are going to be battered, and the batter's going to help with the firmness and help hold everything together. But just, you know, get all the leaves up, and however you need to fold them over, that's fine. Just tuck and roll. So all 6 are stuffed. I'm going to set this back in the refrigerator for at least half an hour, maybe more. To final assembly, and I'm using a 2-cup measuring cup here. And I know there are a lot of steps here, but everything up until this point may be done ahead. Beating an egg, and I'm using this cup because I want something kind of deep and narrow for dipping. So this is 1/2 cup of buttermilk. Beat that in, and you've seen me make this batter before. It's kind of my standard batter. And this is a 1/2 cup of self-rising flour. If you don't have self-rising flour, add a 1/2 teaspoonful of baking powder and a pinch of salt. Beat out all the lumps, and then I'm going to add just a little bit, about a teaspoonful of fresh lemon juice. I better get that seed out. And then this little bit of acid adds some flakiness to your final product. So we're going for the thickness of, say, pancake batter and no lumps, and we're ready to go. Final assembly, squash. They've been refrigerated. They're nice and firm. And I have some panko crumbs, I have some cornstarch, and I have my batter. And the squash have been weeping just a little, so they're pretty moist. And that's actually good. We're just going to roll them around in this cornstarch, which will help the batter stick. And then I'm going to hold them by the stem and drop it down in the batter. And just make sure that the batter's covered all the way around, and then let the excess drip off. And then I'll move them over into the panko crumbs. If you're not familiar with panko crumbs, they're really crispy breadcrumbs, and you can use other breadcrumbs, but I recommend panko. And you can find them in your supermarket or your store, usually where the fish breading and that sort of stuff is. Panko shrimp are to die for. So there you go, that one's done, and I've got a little sprinkled cornstarch over there on a piece of wax paper. I'll let you see me do just one more. So roll it well in the cornstarch, then dip it into the batter, and really that little stem is quite helpful. Let your excess batter drip off always, and then into the panko crumbs, and cover it well. I'm going to do all 6 of these, finish up, and then I'll meet you at the stove. Got a small cast iron skillet here, 2/3 full of oil, never more than 2/3. Showing you my spider. It's a great tool. You don't have to have a spider, but it helps. And you just slide these in. Your oil should be medium heat, medium hot. It sizzled when I dropped in crumbs. And we're going to put these in, and you've heard me talk about the rules for frying. They're the same with this. You drop it in and leave it alone until it gets nice and golden brown on one side. This batter is pretty firm, but you want it to crisp up before you start trying to turn it over. Like this, you see the bottom is golden brown, and they've let go from the pan. And oops, I've got a bit of cheese escaping. That's actually okay. So we're just going to flip them over. Use a fork to make sure you don't get a big splash. And that took 2.5 minutes. And we're going to flip that over and let it do that again. And I have a little tiny bit of cheese escaping. That's okay. I'll just, any of it that's escaping, I'll just wipe away. But there you go. That one is beautiful and perfect and golden brown all the way around. I'm going to put it over here on a rack to drain. It was the smallest one, so it's done the first. And see that little bit of cheese that's escaping there? It'll be okay. We'll get rid of it. I've never actually done this where a little bit of cheese didn't escape. So I'm going to fry the other 3 just the same way. And then I'm going to show you a little garnish technique. We'll be right back for that. So you know how your favorite fish and chips restaurant has this little bed of crumblies? Well, we're going to make some crumblies. I've got a tea strainer there, any kind of strainer will do, and I'm putting a scoop of the batter, because you know I had a lot of batter here because it's hard to make a small enough amount that'll still cover your squash blossoms. So we're just dropping some of that batter into the hot oil, and when it's sizzling good, just stir through it with a fork. And we're just going to let these get brown and crispy. And some of them are big and some of them are little, but this is really just a garnish, and it makes the plate look nice. So when they're nice and brown and crispy, I'm going to take them up on a paper towel, and then I'm going to plate this up and show you what we've got. So I'm serving this with some blackberry preserves because that sweet and savory mixture is great. We've got them on a bed of the crumbs and a little bit of fruit This is pretty. It's striking for your guest. And that crunch. And this can be either eaten with a fork or it can be a finger food. Usually it's an appetizer, not an entree. Gonna dip it here in this sweet preserves, and oh my, I have to tell you, this really is the best appetizer I've ever made. See all that lovely cheese in there? And it holds up, even though it had a little bit of cheese escape. And the sweet and savory together is just marvelous. Now, you know, you can serve it with salsa. You could serve it with just melted cheese. You could serve it with almost anything you wanted to. But I really like the preserves with it. And then just a little touch of fruit, maybe some melon balls. And you know, a guilty pleasure. I love these little crunchies. So I hope you try this. It's a seasonal thing. It's really good. It's impressive to your guest. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch. I hope to see you again tomorrow.